In 2007, two University of Utah students vanished without a trace during what should have been a routine day hike in the remote Red Rock Canyons near Moab, Utah. Jessica Chen, 19, and Michael Torres, 20, both experienced hikers and geology students, had left their car at a trailhead early that morning and simply never returned. But 1 week later, after the largest search operation in the area's history, rescue workers would make a discovery so extraordinary that it would challenge everything they thought they knew about survival, endurance, and the hidden secrets buried beneath the Utah desert. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of September 15th, 2007, had dawned clear and crisp in the canyon country outside Moab. Jessica Chen zipped up her lightweight hiking jacket and adjusted the straps on her well-worn backpack, the same red pack that had accompanied her on dozens of geological field trips throughout her undergraduate studies. Her hiking boots, scuffed from countless miles across Utah's unforgiving terrain, left neat prints in the red dust as she walked toward the trailhead where Michael Torres was waiting. Consulting a topographical map with the methodical precision that had made him one of the top students in their geology program, Michael folded the map carefully, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent countless hours navigating the intricate maze of slot canyons, mesas, and hidden valleys that defined this corner of the American Southwest. At 20, he already possessed the quiet confidence of an experienced desert hiker, someone who understood that the stunning beauty of the Red Rock country came with inherent dangers that demanded respect and preparation. His dark hair caught the early morning light as he looked up at Jessica, offering the easy smile that had first drawn her to him during their freshman year mineralogy class. "Ready for another adventure?" he asked, shouldering his own pack with the casual motion of someone for whom hiking had become as natural as breathing. Jessica nodded, her ponytail swaying as she took a final look at their car, a reliable Honda Civic that had carried them to countless hiking destinations throughout their college years. They had planned this particular expedition as a combination of recreation and academic research, hoping to collect rock samples from some of the more remote canyon systems for their senior thesis projects. The area they had chosen for their hike was known for its spectacular but challenging terrain, a network of narrow slot canyons and hidden alcoves that had been carved by millions of years of wind and water erosion. Unlike the more popular hiking destinations closer to Moab, this particular section of the desert saw relatively few visitors, which made it perfect for serious geological work, but also meant that help would be far away if something went wrong. Both students understood these risks, and both had taken the necessary precautions, packing extra water, emergency supplies, and communication devices. As they set off down the trail, their boots crunching softly on the mixture of sand and broken rock that covered the desert floor, neither Jessica nor Michael could have imagined that they were walking toward an experience that would test every survival skill they had ever learned. The September sun climbed steadily higher, painting the towering canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson, while the two students made their way deeper into the labyrinthine wilderness that stretched endlessly in all directions. Their parents would later reconstruct the events of that morning with painful precision, piecing together details from credit card receipts, gas station security footage, and the testimony of a park ranger who had briefly spoken with the couple at the trailhead. Jessica had called her mother the night before, excitedly describing their plans to explore a series of unmarked slot canyons that Michael had identified on geological survey maps. Her voice had been filled with the enthusiasm that characterized all her academic pursuits, the same passion that had led her to change her major from business to geology after taking her first earth science course. Michael's roommate would later tell investigators that his friend had spent hours that week researching the area's geological history, poring over academic papers and government survey reports with the intensity that had made him a favorite among the geology department faculty. He had been particularly interested in the area's Cold War history, fascinated by stories of military installations and communication facilities that had been built throughout the desert Southwest during the height of nuclear tensions with the Soviet Union. His roommate remembered him mentioning something about finding evidence of old military activity in the canyon systems, though the details of their conversation would prove frustratingly vague when investigators pressed for more information. By noon on September 15th, Jessica and Michael should have been making their way back toward the trailhead, their packs heavy with rock samples and their cameras full of photographs documenting their geological discoveries. Instead, they were nowhere to be found, and as the afternoon stretched into evening without any sign of their return, the first seeds of worry began to take root in the minds of those who knew them best. Jessica's roommate, Sarah Martinez, was the first to raise the alarm. She had been expecting Jessica to return by early evening, as they had made plans to study together for an upcoming mineralogy exam. When Jessica failed to answer her phone and didn't respond to text messages, Sarah initially assumed that her friend had simply lost track of time while collecting samples, something that had happened before during their field research expeditions. But as the hours passed and Jessica continued to remain unreachable, Sarah's concern deepened into genuine fear. She called Michael's roommate, hoping to get some reassurance that the two students were simply running late, but found that he was equally worried about his friend's absence. Michael had been expected back by dinner time, and it was completely unlike him to disappear without explanation or to ignore calls from concerned friends. Both roommates tried to convince themselves that the missing students were simply dealing with car trouble or had decided to extend their hike into the evening, but neither explanation felt entirely convincing. By 10 o'clock that night, both sets of parents had been contacted, and by midnight, the Grand County Sheriff's Office had been officially notified of the students' disappearance. The initial response was measured and professional, the kind of careful approach that law enforcement agencies use when dealing with missing persons cases in the desert Southwest. Statistics showed that the vast majority of such cases were resolved within 24 hours, usually involving hikers who had simply gotten lost or had experienced minor equipment failures that delayed their return. Sheriff's Deputy Maria Santos arrived at the trailhead at dawn on September 16th, her patrol vehicle kicking up clouds of red dust as she parked next to the students' abandoned Honda. The car sat exactly where Jessica and Michael had left it, doors locked and windows rolled up, looking strangely vulnerable in the vast emptiness of the desert landscape. Santos conducted a thorough examination of the vehicle, noting that the students had taken their packs and hiking gear, but had left behind their wallets, containing their identification and emergency contact information. The presence of the abandoned car transformed what had been a missing persons case into a full-scale search and rescue operation. By noon on September 16th, teams of volunteers had joined professional search crews in combing the canyon systems where the students were believed to have been hiking. The searchers moved methodically through the narrow passages and hidden alcoves, calling out the missing students' names and listening for any response that might indicate their location. Dr. Robert Harrison, the chair of the University of Utah's Geology Department, arrived at the search site on the second day, bringing with him detailed knowledge of the area's geological features and the specific research interests that had drawn Jessica and Michael to this particular location. He worked closely with search coordinators to identify the most likely areas where the students might have encountered trouble, using his understanding of their academic backgrounds and hiking experience to narrow down the search parameters. Jessica and Michael were both excellent students and experienced hikers, Dr. Harrison told the assembled search teams. They understood the dangers of desert hiking and always took appropriate precautions. If they're in trouble, it's likely due to circumstances beyond their control, not because of poor planning or reckless behavior. His words carried the weight of professional authority, but they also revealed the growing concern that something serious had happened to the missing students. As the search entered its third day, the scale of the operation continued to expand. Helicopter crews joined the ground teams, using thermal imaging equipment to scan the canyon systems from above, while specialized rescue dogs were brought in to track any scent trails that might lead to the missing students. The Red Rock country that had seemed so beautiful and inviting during Jessica and Michael's morning departure now appeared forbidding and hostile, a maze of dead ends and hidden dangers that could easily swallow two people without leaving any trace of their passage. The parents of both students had arrived at the search site, setting up a makeshift command post in the parking area where they could monitor the progress of the rescue efforts. Jessica's mother, Linda Chen, was a composed woman who had emigrated from Taiwan as a young adult and had built a successful career as a software engineer. Her methodical approach to problem-solving served her well during the agonizing hours of waiting, as she organized volunteer schedules and maintained detailed logs of all search activities. Michael's father, Carlos Torres, was a retired military officer whose understanding of tactical operations proved invaluable in coordinating the various search teams. His weathered face showed the strain of worry, but his voice remained steady as he worked with professional rescuers to develop systematic search patterns that would cover the maximum amount of territory in the shortest possible time. Both parents struggled with the terrible uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to their children, clinging to hope while preparing themselves for the worst possible news. The terrain that the search teams encountered was both breathtakingly beautiful and incredibly challenging. The slot canyons that Jessica and Michael had come to explore were narrow passages carved deep into the red sandstone, some so tight that searchers had to turn sideways to squeeze through them. These canyons could extend for miles underground, branching and connecting in ways that created an almost infinite number of possible routes that the missing students might have taken. Search team leader Captain Jennifer Walsh had coordinated dozens of desert rescue operations throughout her career, but the complexity of this particular search was unlike anything she had encountered before. The canyon system seemed to swallow sound, making it difficult for searchers to communicate with each other or to hear any potential calls for help from the missing students. Radio signals were frequently blocked by the towering rock walls, forcing search teams to rely on visual signals and predetermined meeting points to maintain coordination. "We're dealing with some of the most challenging terrain in the entire Southwest," Captain Walsh explained to reporters who had begun gathering at the search site. "These canyon systems are incredibly complex, with passages that can extend for miles underground. We're using every available resource, but we need the public to understand that this is going to take time." Her words were carefully chosen to maintain hope while acknowledging the severity of the situation. By the fourth day of searching, the story had attracted national media attention, with news crews arriving from Salt Lake City and Denver to cover the unfolding drama. The image of two young college students vanishing into the Utah desert captured the public imagination, generating hundreds of tips and offers of assistance from concerned citizens across the region. Social media pages dedicated to the search began attracting thousands of followers, with people sharing prayers, encouragement, and their own theories about what might have happened to Jessica and Michael. The search teams had covered hundreds of square miles of desert terrain, following every possible route that the students might have taken during their planned day hike. They had found scattered evidence of human presence, including a few footprints that might have belonged to the missing students, but nothing that provided a clear indication of their fate or current location. The vastness of the search area, combined with the complex geology of the canyon systems, made it impossible to guarantee that every possible hiding place had been thoroughly examined. Dr. Harrison spent hours with the search coordinators, sharing his knowledge of the area's geological features and the specific research interests that had drawn Jessica and Michael to this location. He explained that both students had been fascinated by the region's military history, particularly the Cold War-era installations that had been built throughout the desert Southwest. Michael, in particular, had been researching the network of communication facilities and bunkers that had been constructed during the 1950s and 1960s, many of which had been abandoned and forgotten as military priorities shifted. Michael was always interested in the intersection of geology and history, Dr. Harrison explained. He spent a lot of time researching old military installations, trying to understand how they had been integrated into the natural landscape. Jessica shared his interest in the area's history, and they often discussed the possibility of finding evidence of these installations during their fieldwork. These details provided search teams with additional areas to investigate, but they also highlighted the enormous scope of the terrain that needed to be covered. As the search entered its fifth day, the emotional toll on the families and search teams began to show. The initial optimism that had characterized the early stages of the operation was giving way to a more somber recognition of the challenges they faced. Desert survival experts noted that while it was possible for experienced hikers to survive for several days without food, the lack of water in the arid climate meant that time was running out for any hope of finding the students alive. The search teams had been working around the clock, with volunteers and professional rescuers taking turns to ensure that the operation could continue without interruption. The red rock canyons that had seemed so inviting from a distance now appeared as an endless maze of potential hiding places, each one requiring careful examination before it could be ruled out as a possible location for the missing students. Local businesses and organizations had rallied to support the search effort, providing food, water, and equipment for the growing number of volunteers. The small town of Moab, accustomed to outdoor recreation accidents and occasional search operations, had never seen anything approaching the scale of this particular effort. Hotel rooms were filled with family members and volunteers, while restaurants stayed open late to feed the exhausted search teams. The psychological pressure on the search coordinators was immense. Every decision about where to deploy limited resources carried the weight of 2 young lives, and the knowledge that time was running out made every hour feel precious. Captain Walsh had been working with minimal sleep, coordinating between helicopter crews, ground teams, and volunteer groups, while maintaining regular communication with the families of the missing students. On the 6th day of searching, a breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source. A volunteer searcher named David Kim, himself a geology student from a nearby university, had been exploring a particularly remote section of the canyon system when he noticed something that caught his attention. Hidden behind a screen of desert vegetation and carefully camouflaged with natural rock formations, he discovered what appeared to be an artificial structure, something that didn't belong in the natural landscape. Kim immediately radioed his discovery to the search coordinators, describing what he had found in terms that were both exciting and frustratingly vague. He reported finding evidence of human construction in an area that was supposed to be pristine wilderness, but the complex terrain and poor radio reception made it difficult for him to provide precise details about his discovery. Search teams began converging on his location, but the narrow canyon passages and difficult terrain meant that it would take hours for reinforcements to reach him. The discovery energized the entire search operation, providing the first concrete lead that searchers had found after nearly a week of systematic but frustrating effort. Family members who had been struggling to maintain hope suddenly found themselves overwhelmed with new possibilities, while search coordinators began reorganizing their deployment to focus on Kim's discovery and the surrounding area. Captain Walsh coordinated the response to Kim's find, dispatching her most experienced team members to investigate the structure he had discovered. The terrain was so challenging that it took the professional rescuers more than 3 hours to reach Kim's location, navigating narrow passages and climbing over boulder formations that blocked their path. When they finally arrived, they found that Kim's discovery was even more significant than his initial radio report had suggested. The structure was clearly artificial, constructed from concrete and steel in a way that suggested military or government origins. It had been so carefully camouflaged that it was virtually invisible from more than a few feet away, explaining why previous search teams had missed it during their systematic coverage of the area. The entrance appeared to be sealed, but the rescuers could detect faint sounds coming from within, sounds that might have been human voices calling for help. The rescue team immediately began working to gain access to the structure, using specialized equipment to examine the sealed entrance and determine the best way to open it safely. The sounds from within were intermittent and difficult to interpret, but they provided hope that Jessica and Michael might still be alive after nearly a week in the desert. Radio calls went out to bring additional equipment and medical personnel to the remote location, while family members were notified that a significant development had occurred. Dr. Harrison arrived at the discovery site just as the rescue team succeeded in opening the entrance to the mysterious structure. What they found inside would challenge everything they thought they knew about survival, endurance, and the hidden history of the Utah desert. The structure was revealed to be a sophisticated underground facility, clearly constructed during the Cold War era and designed to serve as some kind of communication or observation post. But most importantly, huddled together in the depths of the concrete bunker, severely dehydrated but miraculously alive, were Jessica Chen and Michael Torres. They had survived an entire week underground, trapped by a malfunctioning door mechanism but sustained by their knowledge of survival techniques and their determination to stay alive until rescue came. Their discovery alive after so many days was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to human resilience and the power of never giving up hope. The medical team that examined the students found them to be severely dehydrated and weakened by their ordeal, but otherwise in remarkably good condition considering their week-long imprisonment. They had survived by carefully rationing the small amount of water they had brought with them, supplemented by moisture they had been able to collect from condensation within the bunker. Their geology training had served them well, as they understood the importance of conserving body heat and energy during their long wait for rescue. Jessica and Michael's rescue marked the end of one of the most intensive search operations in Utah's history. But it was also the beginning of a new mystery as investigators began to examine the Cold War-era facility where the students had been trapped. The bunker contained decades-old government documents and equipment, revealing its history as part of a secret military communications network that had been largely forgotten in the decades since the end of the Cold War. The students' ordeal had transformed them from missing persons into survivors, their story serving as an inspiration to countless others who faced seemingly impossible circumstances. Their rescue after 7 days underground proved that even in the most challenging situations, hope and determination could overcome apparently insurmountable odds. The discovery of the secret bunker also opened new chapters in the understanding of Cold War military history, revealing how extensively the government had prepared for potential nuclear conflict. In the weeks that followed their rescue, Jessica and Michael would recover fully from their physical ordeal, but the psychological impact of their experience would stay with them for years to come. They had stared death in the face and emerged victorious, their survival serving as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can find a way to endure and overcome.